Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Renee Grace, Director of Museum of Brisbane. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. For me, the Impossible Conversation project started, and I thought, ooh, is this possible? When we first began banding around the idea with our lovely friend here, Rebecca Lemoyne, the Director of Public Engagement and Learning at QPAC, we all felt its potential, but we were a little bit uncertain about what the final result would be. And that's where Sam came in. Everything really depended upon everyone who's involved in the project and really putting their hands up to be part of this incredible idea. The genuine interest was overwhelming. We were looking at historical figures, and we were trusting, artists to engage with that conversation, and also photographers and writers to just create something that we actually didn't know what would be the outcome. So really here, as the Museum of Brisbane, we're here about collaborating with artists in the community and trying to do things a bit differently and a bit new and amazing. So we partnered with QPAC and we did a call out to people to come forward with their idea for an impossible conversation with a figure from Italian history. And when we did speak to Rebecca about it, it was like we wanted to have a conversation with someone who's dead. We did have a bit of how do we market this? But anyway, that's another story. But we were stunned by the response. The people who nominated the characters, their interest in them, the topics of conversation were extraordinary. We couldn't have scripted the interesting figures and conversations that came to us. And they were really inspirational, and you'll see that Sam was also totally inspired by them. And you also find in the QPAC tunnel the second part of this exhibition, which was really involving writer Mary Rose and photographer Jacqueline to really finalise this beautiful outcome for us. So without further ado, let's hear their stories, and I'll welcome Rebecca to facilitate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. And can I just say on behalf of all of my colleagues from QPAC, and many of them are here with us tonight, thank you very much to the Museum of Brisbane, to Renee and Georgie and the whole entire team. They've been wonderful partners in this project and partners of the 2018 QPAC International Series. I'd also just like to say a huge and warm thank you to our 9 participants who've taken part in this project from the community. To Kira and Canio, Marie, Mihai, Massimo, Dominique, Liana, Sarah and Jacqueline, who had 2 hats in this particular project. Thank you so much for being so willing to go with us on a project where we had no real idea what the outcome was going to look like. And for your generosity in that, but particularly for making yourselves so vulnerable in the time that you spent with all of these artists and telling real stories it was the only way we'd get to the kind of outcome that we did. So thank you so very much for doing that. For me, this kind of obsession with the idea of an impossible conversation, as you'll read, was inspired by the impossible interviews that Vanity Fair used to do way back in the 1930s. And it seemed a very beautiful device to be able to tell people's stories, to tell biographical details, to tell historical details of place and context, which is entirely what we were trying to do with the Italian community or communities influenced by Italian culture here in Brisbane. And so to all of our creatives and to Sam particularly tonight on this exhibition, congratulations. It's been quite a journey, but what an amazing outcome. And I'll just quickly introduce to you as well Mary Rose, who was, as you heard, the writer on the project. She has published 5 novels, soon to be 6, I believe, a non-fiction book, a memoir, short stories, journalism, all kinds of things. And now she can add to that list Impossible Conversations. And Jacqueline, who we asked to document this project as our photographer. She's been published in a heap of magazines, and this one I need to read to get right because you were, I believe, in the top 10 of Capture Magazine's Australasia's Emerging Photographers in Travel category this year for some work that you did in Bangladesh. So congratulations on that. But we really carefully chose all 3 of these creators because they understand nuance, and we knew that even though we were kind of vague's the wrong word. We were ambitious about what we wanted to achieve with this project, and they were all prepared to come with us on that journey. Sam, you were the first one to come on board, and I wanted to ask you, when the Museum of Brisbane team and I sat down with you and gave you this kind of like crazy vision of this project, what did you think and why did you say yes?
Well, I speak vague fluently, so that was perfect. I mean, the way I often work is very much, kind of taking disparate narratives and things that seemingly wouldn't be connected if it weren't for the kind of the work that it ends up being made. So I guess for me it was easy to just kind of say yes and then realise that something will happen eventually, because that's how I do. That's how I work. So
We seem like your
perfect.
people.
Exactly. No, it was an easy yes.
And of course, as we went along on the project, we got a little better at kind of describing what it was going to be about. So by the time we came to have conversations with Mary Rose and with Jacqueline, I'd like to think we were a little better at describing it. But can I put the same question to both of you, perhaps Jax first, about why it is that you said yes to be part of this project?
I actually nominated someone to have a conversation with initially. So I saw the project online and was like, oh, that is so me. And then was selected. So that was pretty exciting. And then I reread the competition guidelines, and they actually mentioned you were supposed to be Italian heritage, and I'm actually English heritage. So I was trying to get hold of Rebecca to say, oh, look, I'm not actually Italian, but I really want to be involved. And I do have a little bit of a history with Italy. I've travelled quite a lot. And actually 9 years ago today, I arrived in a small town called Naples and had a rather big accident, which was actually 9 years ago tomorrow. And have a very big connection with Italy, and from that accident I had a blood transfusion, so I like to tell everyone that I have Italian blood. So I swung by Rebecca and it flew.
That seems
and she
legitimate.
said, actually, we'd been playing phone tag, and she said, that's not why I was trying to get hold of you. And she'd seen some of my work online, and she said, we'd actually like you to be the photographer. So that's really why I said yes, because it was like, QPAC's calling? Of course I'm saying yes. And it followed on from a project I'd done about 4 years ago with the Brisbane Italian community, and had been thinking about picking up again, which I'm not sure if I'd mentioned previously, around the time Rebecca called. So I was like, sure. So,
yeah.
And Mary Rose, how about you?
Well, I thought the idea was actually vague is my first language. I should say that at the beginning. And when you talked to me about the idea, Rebecca, I thought, how will I ever do that in a million years? Like, I just thought, these people are not only not alive, the people you're having the conversation with to interview, there's so much written about them that they're in the kind of public imagination already. And I don't know who the people who've nominated them are. I'll go and interview them. So it was just, I think, honestly, artistic curiosity. Like, I just thought, wow, what could you possibly do with this? How exciting. And then when we had a meeting, I just thought, wow, this is going to be so much fun. And in fact, at that time, I thought all the collaboration would be with the artists, but Sam doesn't live in Brisbane, so we didn't see much of him. Jax and I, I didn't mean it that way. I meant we sort of didn't, but Jax and I talked. But the collaboration was actually with all the people who I went to interview, who have sort of become very dear to me in a way. And it started out, it was just artistic curiosity, and it built from there.
Thank you. Now, Sam, we started off where we thought we'd end up with one exquisite image from you for each of our 9 participants, and instead we have this amazing exhibition full of unbelievable works. So what happened? Like, what was it in those conversations with our participants that you decided to go from here to here?
Well, I mean, yeah, so the way that I've always really made work, I have a real interest in historical narratives, historical events, and often from the first moment of thinking about work or thinking about making work and then finally exhibiting it or executing it, can be years, and often the shape of the work really changes. And so for me, I thought that process of going and speaking to the participants and hearing their stories and their interests and what they wanted to explore and how they wanted to address the kind of the question, that was just the perfect starting point, and then letting it all kind of unfurl from there. And so with the fact that there are so many images and there are, quite a few per person and per participant, there's some overlap that exists in there as well. And so certain things kind of relate to multiple historical figures. And I really like the fact that, for me, during the process of speaking to each participant, because I did it in that sort of period of time where there was overlap on the same day or in the same week, I'd speak to a few people, and there were little elements that could just as easily apply to one as to another. And so it made sense for there to be not so much ambiguity, but a kind of a continuation between the different works. And so, yeah, for me, that sort of idea of not having a really clear, didactic, linear narrative just, made a lot of sense.
That's quite amazing. And we should say that the kind of people that our participants chose to talk to, whilst we did make sure that they needed to be dead, they're also quite
explicitly
famous and well known. And I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to look around, and this is going to get a little bit pub choir, so help me out a little bit, but who they are. So we've got Casanova and Galileo and
Dante. And Giulietta Messina. And St. Agatha, Artemia Gentileschi, and who have I missed? Of course, Marco Pannella, Giorgio Vasari, and Michele Romano, of course.
Yeah. So it's quite an amazing group. So yes, you can see where there might be linkages along the way from that. One thing that I wanted to ask all of you, because in talking to all three of these amazing creatives during the process, they all obviously had their own challenges about how they were going to manifest these conversations, either in the written form or the photographic form or the visual art form. And I wondered if now you've seen it all kind of come together, do you think that one of the other of you, was able to achieve something you weren't outside of your form? Was there something that Jax was able to tell via photography that you found a particular challenge? Who wants to go first? Sam.
The fact that through the writing and the photography, the kind of the connection between the individual participants and their selected historical figures, whether the connection was through history or through a personal connection, it can kind of, the writing and photography can link the two far more explicitly, which is a really, really interesting element. And for me, it was deliberately kind of, the lines were blurred, but the fact that it's sort of a bit more, removed, I think was sort of, that's kind of the biggest distinction, I think.
And Jax?
I guess the processes were really quite different. And last time I did an Italian portrait project, I interviewed as well. So I was quite reliant on what Mary Rose found out, because there was three of us going to see people. I didn't want to be the third person going to interview and sit down, because Sam and Mary Rose did that, given we had to do a photo shoot as it was. So I waited to see a little bit of what Sam was doing, just to get an idea and make sure we weren't going to overlap. We weren't going to overlap, it was fine, just visually. And just really relying on Mary Rose, both in what she sent through, but also conversations that we had, just to get an idea of both the people who lived locally, but also their connection to that historical character, and to kind of understand where they were coming from. So I had to do a lot of pre-planning, whereas I could see Mary Rose was kind of, she'd done her interview and was then tweaking, and Sam had done his sit down, and then he could go away and work on it, whereas I felt like I had to do a lot of pre-work, and then I had that one chance to make sure I found what I was looking for when I did the photo shoot, which was challenging, but amazing subjects, really, really good. Given all the nerves, everyone was really amazing. So.
Mary Rose?
I think that initially with Sam's work, I just was really fascinated with what you'd come up with. I just thought, wow, it just, to me, because I'm not a visual artist, it was completely wowed when I kind of saw the first images. And I have to say that with Jax, at the beginning I thought, I have to get to know the person from history. I have to get to know the person who's in life and stuff. And all Jax has got to do is go and take a photograph. Anyway, then we started talking about exactly what it was that Jax was doing. And I thought, actually, that's hard. That's really hard. And then I went to one of Jax's photo shoots and I thought, that's a lot harder than writing a conversation. Like I just, but
that was the hardest photo shoot you came to.
but the person I really want to mention in terms of you, I think your question was, what did someone contribute that you didn't feel you could, is you, Rebecca, because what you contributed was this just absolutely outstanding idea, and then you let it kind of be. I couldn't do what you did. I wouldn't think of it for a start because I'm not that creative, but you let it sort of be wobbly, and the Museum of Brisbane folk did as well. And then you've come out the other end and just produced something, I think, really important for the 9 people who risk so much in talking to us, but really important for the city of Brisbane. So you're the one I'm most kind of wishing that I could have your skills, but sadly I don't.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask, because I've learned so much, like as your creative work started to come back through, but was there something that you learned or that surprised or shocked you, either from one of the famous people from history or from one of our participants? What didn't you know that you know now?
I would say that the thing that surprised me most was that everyone has a story, and I could go through and embarrass the 9 of you enormously and say that it was because of you, and it was entirely because of you that in doing the writing I could get a link to the famous person from history, not because you knew a lot about them, but because something in your heart kind of matched theirs. And I think I've met with just about everybody tonight to say what that was for me. But Rebecca's already thanked you for your generosity. I'd just like to add to that that's what surprised me, that we have people who are so enormously kind of gifted in the community in different ways, and all of whom who have a story and who chose to share it for this project. So that was the thing, I think, for me.
Jax?
I think St. Agatha was probably my surprise one that I didn't know. There was a couple I didn't know heaps about. Dante and Galileo weren't too hard. But St. Agatha of Sicily, who was with Dominic Rizzo, and I've shot Dominic before. Probably should word that better. But anyway, I don't know if people know Dominic, she has a restaurant up in Nunda now, but used to have Mondo Organics, I think it was called, down at West End. And she is a really strong woman. She's amazing and formidable and beautiful, and she's this amazing character. And she's chosen this saint who died at the age of 15, was martyred at the age of 15, who's so gentle and innocent and beautiful, and this resonance. And I talked to Dominic after she'd read Mary Rose's conversation, and I read my conversation with Artemia, which I teared up at. It was quite emotional reading it. I feel this huge connection with this point in history, and Dominic had that same reaction. So that was both seeing that side of Dominic, that softer, not going for it and ruling the world with her beautiful food tours and restaurant. But yeah, that really beautiful connection with her heritage, but also this saint.
And Sam, what about you? Because this is right in your wheelhouse of historical stuff, right?
Very much so. I mean, I was really, really interested in the idea that there were varying, the figures that were chosen to have the impossible conversations with really varied with the level of personal and historical connection, yet I sort of knew from the start that it was going to be more about the individual participants, that was sort of the whole point. They were kind of tricked into identifying someone from history, but actually it was kind of more about them. And so I really like that that idea that each connection was intensely personal, whether it was through an actual connection or not. I mean, I was really, really fascinated to learn so much more about each person. I think specifically, I mean, like, it's sort of hard to pick one out, but to learn about Marco Pannella, I think, was a really, really fascinating story, and to think that through Marco's story and Mihai's connection to him, but then through every participant's connection, the fact that these incredibly international stories are linked to Brisbane and have are anchored here, I thought was endlessly fascinating.
Oh, thank you. We do have a few minutes left before we wrap up. I wondered if anyone might have a question that they might want to, I was going to say shoot up, no, ask of one of the creatives up here. Or do you want to just go back and look more closely at those beautiful Oh, it works. Okay, well, they're going to be around here anyway, so you can ask them questions after this. But thank you again, everyone, for coming out on a rainy Brisbane night. I know it sometimes deters a lot of people from a lot of things. Thank you to all our beautiful participants and to the Museum of Brisbane and to these three guys. And congratulations, Sam, on the opening of this exhibition tonight. It'll run through until March next year here at the Museum of Brisbane, so you've got a lot of time to bring all your families and friends through. The Impossible Conversations in the QPAC tunnel is now up and live, and I'd encourage you all to go over there and have a look as well. And it'll be there through to the end of November, which is when La Scala will have its first engagement here in Australia as part of the 2018 QPAC International Series. So thank you all so much. Stay, hang around, have a chat, have a drink, but I'd leave you with a little provocation from this exhibition to think about if you were able to have your own impossible conversation, who might it be that you choose to do that with? Thank you. Have a good night.